the ledger.
Break the seal on the ledger.
With a bow made of bone and a crown of tarnished gold, he rides into the halls where the tea grows cold, and the popcorn sits unating in the silver bowls. The Red Rider follows with a blade long and heavy to cut the wires that hold the elite in their seats. The walls of sweat and blood onto the maps of Italy, where 80% of the dust is owned by 20% of the beats.
Owned by 20% of the beats.
When will the horsemen cometh to disgorge the stolen heap?
They disgorge the stolen heap.
They come to reap the harvest that the few refuse to share.
You refuse to share.
Leveling the towers until the ground is bare. The horseman cometh while the people and stare. The horseman cometh while the people sit and stare. The black horse holds the scales that weigh the empty bellies.
That way the empty bellies.
In the bathroom stall, the numbers scream the truth. A function of the hunger, a metric of the greed that tells that the poor are paying for the crimes of their youth.
Crimes of their youth.
And the pale rider follows with the plague in his wake, looking through the glass at the man in the chair, with fire at the heels of the idol on the desk. The math is done and there is no more air. See the rubber band drawn back until the sinew snap. The 80-20 ratio is a trigger in the trap. The lowest sex was England in the year of the Great War, a 3% holding everything while the rest were sent to slaughter. Can you hear the band tighten? Can you feel the tension crawl? Can you hear it snap? Can you hear the sound of the world's final fall? Snap! When will the horsemen cometh to disgorge the stolen heap? They come to reap the harvest that the few refuse to share. Leveling the towers until the ground is bare. The horseman cometh while the people let him stare. The horseman cometh while the people sit and stare. The math is final, the horses are here. Watch the video to see what comes next. The leveling has begun.
Greetings from the fourth wall condos nestled quietly here in the British countryside. I am Elizabeth, your omniscient guide for today's intellectual foray. We are gathered to unpack a rather terrifying mathematical evolution, the journey from a simple 19th century observation to a dynamic gauge of societal collapse. To deconstruct this, we have assembled our panel. Sundown Blackmore will synthesize our findings. Constance will anchor us in the empirical and the mathematical. Occam will ensure our premises remain strictly rational, and Greg Hyrius is here to provide, well, the prevailing orthodox perspective. Let us listen in.
We must start by stripping away the modern corporate jargon surrounding the so-called 80-20 rule. If we apply the razor, what is the fundamental premise? In 1896, the economist Vilfredo Pareto observed a static condition. 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. He noted a highly lopsided distribution of wealth that seemed naturally occurring. He observed a state of being, but not a trajectory.
And what's wrong with that? That is just the natural order of a free market. The people at the top are the job creators. They own 80% of the wealth because they produce 80% of the value. It trickles down. You guys are always trying to use math to wage a culture war against success.
It isn't about a culture war, Greg. It is about structural physics and applied mathematics. Let's look at the actual mechanics of Pareto's observation. Pareto essentially gave us a static ratio, A over B, where A is the percentage of wealth and B is the percentage of the population holding it. But a static ratio is analytically dead. You cannot plot a dynamic trajectory with it. To utilize the full power of mathematical function analysis, we have to transform that static ratio into a dynamic function, y equals f of x.
Exactly, Constance. Epistemologically, as long as both A and B are floating variables, the core truth of the system's fragility remains hidden in the noise. We have to isolate the variables to find the truth.
Precisely. So we hold Pareto's numerator, A, completely constant at 80. We lock in that 80% of the wealth-producing assets. We then let the denominator, B, become our independent variable, X. This simple empirical shift gives us a new, infinitely variable function, y equals 80 over x. This is the Berard-Gemini metric.
Okay, you moved some letters into an equation. Y equals 80 over x. So what? The stock market is still hitting all-time highs. People are focusing on the wrong things, worrying about equations instead of traditional values and hard work.
The so what, Greg, is that y equals 80 over x isn't just an equation on a chalkboard. It is a structural stress gauge for civilization, our civilization. By holding the wealth at 80 and tracking x, we are measuring the exact carrying capacity of the elite class. Pareto thought the 20 was a constant law of nature, but this metric reveals that x moves, and as the wealth pumps siphon more resources to the top, that x shrinks. We have tons of data showing this is happening today.
Mathematically, as x approaches 0, y approaches infinity. It creates a vertical asymptote.
Yes, and that is the asymptote of ruin. We aren't just plotting numbers. We are tracking the structural matrix of society as it stretches. Extensive historical analysis proves that when x enters the single digits, specifically between x equals 3 and x equals 9, the societal rubber band stretches too thin and loses its elasticity. It can no longer absorb shocks. This is when Walter Scheidel's Horsemen are summoned. The wealth is disgorged through mass mobilization warfare, revolution, or an epidemic collapse. Does that sound like a so what, Greg?
Logically, the metric doesn't predict the specific hour the horseman arrives, which would be a predictive fallacy. Rather, it mathematically defines the necessary conditions for the system to tear itself apart. It allows us to see the empirical reality of systemic fragility.
And applying the metric to our current data, the United States is currently sitting at x equals 8.5. This is within the range where other economies have snapped in the past with violent levelings and even the fairly recent U.S. stock market crash of 1929.
We are fully inside the shaded area of ruin, Greg. Look at this graph with the current USA data point. The apex predators have engineered the plumbing so well that they have squeezed the middle class down to a mathematically fatal point. We are at x equals 8.5, and the momentum is carrying us further into the danger zone. History is screaming at us not to approach the asymptote any further.
Look, you guys are throwing around the word ruin like it's some kind of ancient prophecy. It's a curve on a piece of paper. Lines go up, lines go down. The stock market is still hitting all-time highs. People are focusing on the wrong things, worrying about equations instead of traditional values and hard work to repeat a needed point.
It isn't just a line, Greg. It is a measurement of structural tension. And for a while, even orthodox economics has been looking at the wrong asymptote. If you look rightward along the graph, the curve approaches the horizontal asymptote at y equals 0. But that is a mathematical illusion. The x-axis is physically bounded at 100, which would be a perfectly egalitarian society where 100% of the people hold the wealth. The true asymptote of ruin is the vertical y-axis itself, where x equals 0.
Ah, the vertical boundary. Logically, as x approaches 0 from the right, y shoots to infinity straight up the page.
Precisely. The y value isn't just a coordinate. It represents the amount of stretch on the system. It is a simple distance metric. The higher the y value rises up that vertical asymptote, the tighter the societal rubber band is being pulled.
And by the fundamental laws of physics and logic, you cannot stretch a system to infinity. Eventually, anything will snap. The U.S. system could snap at any moment because it already is in the critical range of 3 to 9.
This is exactly how a Walter Scheidel's Horseman is summoned. The wealth pump doesn't just move money, it physically stretches the societal matrix toward that vertical wall. We know from the historical record that the absolute lowest X value a society has ever recorded before snapping is 3, which was set by the United Kingdom in 1913.
Let's look at the distance of that stretch. At the edge of the danger zone, where X is 9, the stretch is 80 over 9. but at x equals 3, the stretch is 80 over 3. Using invert and multiply, the 80s just cancel and 9 over 3 is just 3. Thus, the rubber band is pulled 3 times further up the vertical wall. The kinetic energy trapped in that tension is catastrophic. And what's physically being stretched is the masses having to go farther and farther with less and less. That simply cannot go forever.
This is why societies tear apart at these heights. A civilization simply cannot survive a stretch of 80 over 3. The vertical asymptote acts as an impenetrable brick wall, and the wealth pump is accelerating us directly into it. The United States is currently at x equals 8.5. We are on the vertical climb, and the tension is visibly pulling us upward.
A vertical wall of ruin hiding in plain sight. We have successfully navigated from a simple 19th century observation of Italian land to a precise dynamic metric that maps the structural doom of modern empires. We now see the stretch. We now know the tension, but plotting an asymptote is only the first act. To truly see the Horseman approach, one must watch this metric move across the decades. Until we chart the time series, I bid you all a good evening from the fourth wall.